He was the most wanted man in the city. She was just trying to finish her assignment. The university library was completely full that Tuesday afternoon. Every table taken, every chair occupied, except one, the one across from the girl in the wheelchair. He stood there for a moment. This large, dangerous, tattooed man in an expensive suit, who made people instinctively move out of his way. And he looked at the empty chair. Then he looked at her. She looked back. She did not move. She did not flinch. She just tilted her head slightly and said, "You can sit down. I promise I won't bite." He sat down. And in that one ordinary moment, a man who had never once done anything by accident made the one mistake that would change both their lives forever, because he had no idea whose daughter was sitting across from him. Before we go further, comment below where you're watching this from, and subscribe, because you are not going to want to miss where this story goes. Her name was Ava Collins. She was 26 years old, with blonde hair and a warm, open face that made strangers feel like they already knew her. She had been in that wheelchair for 4 years now, since an accident she never spoke about and never wanted anyone's pity for. Her books were spread across the table, her laptop open, her coffee going cold beside a stack of papers for a PhD she was slowly, stubbornly finishing. She was happy in that quiet way people are when they've made peace with a hard thing. And he had come to that library looking for silence, the kind of silence a man in his position rarely got to have. He hadn't expected a chair. He certainly hadn't expected her. For the next 3 hours, something happened that had no business happening on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. She told him about the novel she was reading, and he listened like it mattered. She asked him a question, and he answered it honestly, which surprised them both. She made a joke about the book on her table, and he laughed, actually laughed, low and surprised, like the sound had been locked away somewhere and had just come loose. It happened twice. Twice she reached past all that careful quiet and pulled something real out of a man who did not do real by accident. He did not understand it, and he did not try to. For 3 hours, he was not who he was anywhere else in this city. He was just a man who had gotten lucky with a chair. What Ava did not notice, at least not right away, were the 2 men standing outside on the sidewalk. They wore dark suits as well. They did not come in. They did not sit. They simply stood near the glass, hands folded in front of them, watching the man at her table the way you watch a fire you are responsible for. They traded a glance between them, one of those looks that says something neither man would ever say out loud. But inside, at the table, none of that existed. There was only a book, a joke, and a man who had forgotten what it felt like to be spoken to like an ordinary person. At one point the talk drifted, the way it does, to family. She told him, lightly, that she hadn't spoken to her father in 8 months. She said it without weight, the way you mention the weather. He noticed she didn't explain why, and he didn't ask, because he understood that some silences are chosen and paid for. What he did not know, what he could never have guessed from the warm, funny woman across the table, was exactly who her father was, or what her father did for a living, or how far that quiet man's reach truly went. Neither of them knew yet how much those 8 months of silence were about to matter. When he finally stood to leave, the afternoon light had gone gold and long across the floor. He thanked her. He did not give her his name, and she found that she liked that a little. A stranger who stayed a stranger. But as he walked toward the doors, she watched him go, and she saw something she had missed all afternoon. The 2 men outside straightened. They fell into step behind him, one on each side, moving the way men move when they are guarding something valuable. Ava sat very still. She was a woman who paid attention, and she filed that small, strange detail quietly away in the back of her mind. He came back the next day, Wednesday. Same time, same chair. He offered no reason, and she did not ask for one, because asking would have broken the fragile, easy thing they had built in a single afternoon. They talked again, and it was just as good. And that Wednesday evening, alone in her apartment with the city humming outside her window, Ava opened her laptop to look up something ordinary, and a news article loaded instead. A face filled the screen. His face. The same calm eyes, the same dark suit. And above it, in heavy black letters, was a headline that made her stomach drop straight through the floor. She had spent 2 afternoons making this man laugh. She had recommended him a book, and she had not even known his name, or that half the city was afraid of it. She went back anyway. The next morning, Thursday, the 3rd day, she sat down across from him again. Not out of naivety, but out of a decision she made with clear eyes and full information. She knew exactly who he was now. And that was the thing about Ava that people always underestimated. She did not do things by accident either. But she watched him differently now. All that Thursday she studied him, the way she studied the books she loved, slowly, carefully, catching the small things. She noticed he always sat with his back to the wall. She noticed how his eyes swept every entrance without ever seeming to move. She noticed the way he went completely still, just for a heartbeat, whenever someone unexpected walked through the doors, and how he only relaxed again once he had decided they were nothing. She was cataloging him, quietly, from behind her warm and ordinary smile, and he had no idea she was doing it. He noticed only that she was different, quieter than the first 2 days, more watchful. He could not put his finger on why, and it bothered him in a way he did not enjoy. At one point, he set down his book and asked her, plainly, if she was all right. She looked up, smiled, and told him she was fine. She was not fine. She was sitting 3 feet from a man the whole city feared, and she was calmer than she had any right to be. And that, more than anything, was what unsettled her about herself. That was the day he told her his name. Just the first one. Marco, he said, like it cost him something to give away even that much. She shook his hand and told him her name was Ava. Just Ava, nothing more. And in that small moment, they were exactly even. He had given her a first name and kept the last one hidden, not knowing she already had it. She had done the very same thing, keeping her father's name locked behind her teeth. 2 people, both holding back the one piece that would change everything, both smiling across a library table as if they had nothing at all to hide. Then came the small things she never asked for. He began moving chairs out of her path before she reached them, quietly, like it was nothing. He held doors with the careful, practiced ease of a man trying very hard not to look like he was paying attention. He learned which shelf held the novels she liked, and started drifting there before she said a word. And she understood something that did not fit anywhere in that news article. The man in those headlines, the one the city whispered about, would never spend his afternoons in a university library learning how a young woman moved through a room so he could make it easier for her. She did not know what to do with that. And honestly, I want you to tell me, right there in the comments, if you had been Ava, sitting at that table, knowing everything she knew, would you have gone back on the 4th day? Because she did. When she arrived on Friday, there was a note waiting for her on the table. 3 words, in careful handwriting. Your usual spot. M. Someone had reserved her table for her. In a public library, where no one reserves anything. A man had made a quiet phone call and simply arranged the world to be gentler for her. She sat holding that little piece of paper for a long time. It should have frightened her, maybe. Instead, it did something else entirely. Something she was not ready to name yet. And she folded the note and slipped it into the pocket of her bag where she kept the things she meant to keep. The next afternoon, late, when the library had nearly emptied out, she watched him read. He was holding the novel she had recommended, an old story about a man the whole world had branded a criminal. And she could tell by the way he held it that he had not read anything for pleasure in years. He was slow with it, careful, like a man relearning something he had lost. And she thought, watching him, this is a man with more power in this city than almost anyone, and he is sitting in a quiet library reading a book because a girl in a wheelchair told him it was worth his time. She stopped pretending, even to herself, that she kept coming back out of simple curiosity. She went home that Saturday evening, lighter than she had felt in months. She unlocked her apartment door, stepped inside, and froze. Her father was sitting in her living room. He had not set foot in her home in 8 months. He had flown in overnight, and he was not there to make peace. On the coffee table in front of him lay a single photograph, a surveillance photo of Ava and Marco leaving the library side by side. And when he looked up at her, his face held something she had never once seen on it in her whole life. Not anger, something far worse. Fear. "Ava," he said quietly, "do you have any idea who that man is?" He told her that night what he had never told her before, that he wasn't just an agent. He was the director of the FBI, and that the man in that photograph was Marco Vitali, a man he had been hunting for 11 years. 3 months, he said. 3 months from a case that would put Marco away for the rest of his life. Ava sat very still and felt two things at once that had no business living in the same body. A deep, old fury at this man, who had been absent from her whole life, and a cold, clear understanding that right now, he genuinely believed he was protecting her. He told her to end it. All of it. No more library, no more talking, no more anything. He told her Marco was dangerous in ways she could not begin to understand. That men like him did not have ordinary lives or ordinary friendships. That everything they touched eventually broke. Ava listened to all of it without saying a word. She did not tell him that she already knew exactly who Marco was. She had known for 4 days. She had walked into that danger with open eyes, while her father sat in Washington thinking his daughter was innocent and unaware. She let him believe it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can hold is a truth the other person does not know you are holding. Then she asked him one question, quietly. In 11 years of hunting this man, she said, had he ever once, even once, found real proof that Marco had directly harmed an innocent person? Not a rival, not another man in that world, an ordinary civilian. Her father opened his mouth to answer, and then he stopped, and the silence stretched out too long, far too long, longer than any innocent silence has a right to be. He looked away from her, and that silence told Ava everything she needed to know, everything her father had not been willing to say out loud. He left her apartment that night with a warning and a promise to keep her safe. And within 4 hours, Ava noticed the car parked across the street that had not been there before. She noticed the man who lingered too long by the coffee shop on the corner. She noticed the second car that took the first one's place near midnight. Her father had put surveillance on her building. Most people would never have caught it. But Ava had spent 4 years moving through a world that assumed a woman in a wheelchair was not really looking at anything. And she had learned to see everything. Surveillance is not subtle to a person who has made a quiet art out of paying attention. She sat by her window and watched the men who had been sent to watch her, and she almost smiled. Sunday morning she went to the library. Marco was already there, at their table, and something in her had shifted overnight and settled into place. She sat down across from him. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she told him the truth, all of it. She told him who her father was. She told him what she knew, and how long she had known it, and that she had come back on the 3rd day, already knowing every dangerous thing there was to know about him. She did not soften it or slow it down. She laid every card on the table and left nothing hidden. Marco went very still. Not the dangerous kind of still she had watched him wear all week when a stranger walked in. This was something else. This was the stillness of a man whose entire understanding of a situation has just been quietly turned inside out. In 11 years of being hunted, of being feared, of always being 3 steps ahead of everyone in every room, no one had ever done this to him. He looked at her like she was a language he did not speak, and when he finally found his voice, all he said was, "You knew, for 4 days, and you came back anyway." It was not a question. She held his eyes and answered him steadily. "I came back because the man in that news article and the man who reserved my table are not the same person. I wanted to understand the difference." For the first time in 11 years, Marco Vitali did not know what to do next. He recovered slowly, the way powerful men do, and then he tried to take control of it the only way he knew how. She needed to disappear for a few days, he told her. His people would keep her safe and out of sight, while he figured out how to handle her father's case without everything falling apart. Ava looked at him, and she shook her head. "Or," she said quietly, "I handle my father myself." He stared at her like he had not heard her right. "He is the director of the FBI, Ava." She straightened in her chair, and she looked at him with the calm certainty of a woman who has been underestimated her entire life and has learned exactly how to turn that into a weapon. "I know," she said. "He is also my father, and there is one thing in this world he will not risk." She picked up her phone, and she called him. Ava asked her father to meet her, alone, No agents, no cars parked across the street, no men lingering by the coffee shop, no one but him. He refused at first, the way a man refuses when he is used to being the most powerful person in every room. So she told him, simply, that if he brought anyone at all, she would be gone before he reached the door. And she meant it, and he heard that she meant it. So Richard Collins, the director of the FBI, came to his daughter's apartment the next evening, Monday, the same way she had asked. Alone, she had spent the days between doing what she did best, not hiding, not running, not waiting to be protected, but paying attention, the way she always had. And when her father sat down across from her, she placed 3 things in front of him. Everything she laid out, she had found herself, quietly, from public court records and old newspaper archives, and the kind of careful reading a PhD student does better than almost anyone. First, in 11 years, there was no record of Marco ever harming an innocent person. Her father already knew that, and his silence had already told her so. Second, 2 years ago, Marco's people had quietly shut down a human trafficking ring that a rival family was running, and the city had never heard a word of it. And third, the one that mattered most, the entire case her father was 3 months from closing rested on the testimony of one witness. A witness who, court records showed plainly, had lied under oath in a trial years before. Her father looked at the papers on the table for a long time. He did not argue. He did not dismiss it. He had become the director of the FBI by following evidence wherever it led, even when it led somewhere he did not want to go, even when it took him apart to get there. And he was doing that now, in his daughter's living room, reading pages she had gathered with nothing but patience and a sharp mind. She watched him, and for the first time in a very long time, she was not angry at him. She only waited. Then she told him the second thing, and this one had nothing to do with evidence. If he moved against Marco anyway, she said, she would never speak to him again. She did not say it as a threat. She said it as a plain fact, the same quiet certainty with which she had said everything else in her life. 8 months of silence had already shown them both what that would look like. And this time, it would not be 8 months. It would be forever. Her father, who had faced down the most dangerous people in the country without blinking, looked at his daughter and understood that she was the one thing his power could not touch. He asked her, finally, how she had found all of it. How a young woman in a wheelchair, finishing a literature degree, had assembled in a matter of days what his agents had missed for years. And Ava told him the truth. She had spent 4 years living in a world that looked right past her, that assumed a woman in a chair could not possibly see anything worth seeing. So she had learned to see everything. She had learned to notice the things everyone else walked by. He looked at her, then the way you look at someone you have known their whole life and are only now, finally, truly seeing. And something in his face broke and softened all at once. He closed the file. He did not promise her the world, and she did not ask him to. He gave her 30 days. 30 days to be shown a reason not to bring the whole thing down. It was not everything, but it was enough. And they both knew that 30 days from a man like her father was a kind of miracle. He stood to leave, and at the door he paused, and for a moment, he was not the director of the FBI at all. He was just a father who had almost lost his daughter twice. Once to an accident he never spoke of either, and once to 8 months of silence. He said her name softly. She said his back. It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was a door left open, and neither of them slammed it. The next morning, Tuesday, 1 week to the day since she had first offered a stranger the only empty chair in the library, Ava went back. Marco was there, at their table, waiting the way he had waited every day. She sat down across from him and told him plainly. He had 30 days to give her father a reason to leave him alone that had nothing to do with her. He looked at her for a long moment, this warm and brilliant woman who had walked into the most dangerous corner of his life and quietly rearranged it. Then he asked her a question no one had ever thought to ask her before. What do you want in return? She looked out the library window at the city for a long time, because nobody asked her that. Not since before the accident. Not her doctors, not her father, not anyone. People asked what she needed, what she required, what she could not do. Nobody asked what she wanted. She turned back to him at last, And she told him, not what he expected, not what the audience expects. She said, I want to finish my PhD. I want to travel to 3 countries I have never been to. I want someone to argue with me about books, who has actually read them. She paused. And I want to come back to this table tomorrow. Marco looked at her across the library table. This warm, brilliant, undefeatable woman who just outmaneuvered the director of the FBI on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 week after they met. And he said, the table will be here. He paused. Then, so will I. It was not a declaration. It was a promise. And from a man who had broken every rule he ever made. It was everything. If this story stayed with you, if you felt something for Ava, take 1 small second and subscribe. These stories take heart to tell, and yours is the only reason they get to keep being told. Thank you for staying till the very end.